Hey there, I'm Rachel Ehring, and you're listening to the Top Music Piano Podcast. Get inspired as we discuss creative resources, trends in piano pedagogy, ways to grow your income and streamline your studio, and new ways to engage your students each week. If you are a teacher who wants to go beyond the method books to create an innovative studio that fosters lifelong music makers, you've come to the right place. Hello, piano teacher friends. Today I have a really special guest that I'm excited for you to meet. She is not only a fantastic pianist, but also a writer. There's a lot in this episode, but one of the big things that we talk about is how piano teachers should approach their own performing and possibly the fears that you might have about performing. There's a lot more in this episode as well, so I'm just going to let you listen, and I know that you're going to have so many takeaways from today. Here's a little bit about Rhonda. Rhonda Rizzo is a writer and a performing and recording pianist. Her novel, The Waco Variations, was released in the summer of 2018, and her numerous articles have appeared in national and international music magazines, including Pianist Magazine, American Music Teacher, Clavier, Piano and Keyboard, and Flute Talk. A specialist in music that borrows from both classical and jazz traditions, Rizzo released 4 CDs: Made in America, Organ Impressions, the piano music of Dave Deason, 2 to Tango music for piano duet, and A Spin on It. Recordings can be found on streaming platforms under the name Rhonda Ringering and on YouTube. She holds a BA from Walla Walla University and an MM from Boston University, and is a passionate advocate of new music and living composers. Here's my interview with Rhonda. Hi, Rhonda. Welcome to the show. I am so excited to meet you today and get to chat with you a little bit. Would you mind introducing yourself and just tell us a little bit about what you do?
My name is Rhonda Rizzo, and I was a career pianist, and I called myself a journeywoman pianist because what I did was everything from concert work on a regional level to accompanying people, to playing musical theater, to teaching piano, both as an adjunct in universities and also private lessons. And then I have had a parallel career as a writer. And so I wrote newspaper articles, I wrote lots of articles for teaching magazines under my former name of Rhonda Ringering, and actually wrote a few books, and the last one of which is actually under my name, Rhonda Rizzo. But now I've kind of combined everything, and I run a blog that I call No Dead Guys, and it has to do with the music of living composers, particularly the piano music of living composers. And that is my love song to people who are writing music today, because that's the stuff I like to play.
Yeah, and I think that's how I came across you, was I just kind of stumbled onto your blog, and there's a lot on your blog. I love just browsing through it because there's a lot of other topics besides just living composers, and we'll talk about a few of those today, but you've had such a wide range of experiences. Can you just give us kind of the, I guess, bird's eye view of how did you get to where you are today?
I got here because I loved to write and I loved to play the piano. And from the time I was 6 years old, I thought, I want to be a concert pianist. Now, of course, I knew nothing about what that meant. And I had, the neighborhood piano teachers, many of whom were really wonderful. Mrs. Edison was my first teacher long time ago. And I went to my first recital when I was 6, and I thought, oh, that looks like fun. And the only image I really had of a concert pianist was Van Cliburn. And so I thought, well, that means I need to be on stage playing with an orchestra or playing solo music. And that's all I thought I had. And by the time I was in the high school age, I was living in Southern Oregon and had the wonder of being one of the best pianists in the county. Now, when you're the best classical pianist in Douglas County, Oregon, it doesn't really set you up for the surprise that happens when you go to university and discover that one of your classmates won the Gina Bachauer when she was 12 and soloed with the Utah Symphony playing Mendelssohn's G minor piano concerto. So my wake-up call let me know, okay, I am not as good as I thought I was, and that was really good for me. because in reality, what happened is I had to examine what I liked to play and what I actually excelled at playing. And college was where I was introduced to the music of 20th century composers. And I blame Prokofiev and Bartok for getting me onto the more modern sounds. And I still remember bringing Bartok's Suite Opus 14 into my piano lesson. And the professor looked at me and he said, "You have a feel for this stuff." And it surprised me because, of course, I was a romantic college student and I wanted to play Chopin and I wanted to play Rachmaninoff and Liszt. And I had deep feelings and they needed to be expressed. But the fact is, I didn't play them as well as I played 20th century music. At the same time of all of this, I had sold my first story when I was 15 because I had an English teacher who said if anybody can get something published, you get an automatic A for the semester.
That's good motivation, huh?
Yeah, it worked for me. I got my A and I thought, oh, this is really great. And so right after college, I wrote a couple of religious teen romance novels and I sold them. And I thought, oh, this writing thing is really easy. Again, not realizing I was playing in a very small puddle, not in the big pond. And by the time I got done with college and the few years afterwards, I was floundering a little bit. I didn't know if I wanted to be a pianist or if I wanted to be a writer. And so I said, well, I've got to make money. And I ended up working in corporate America. I was doing corporate sales. And one day I was out selling pagers. This was, back in the early 90s, and I was selling pagers to corporate accounts. And I was 100 and some percent of quota. And it was pouring down rain. It was in Portland, Oregon, as only Portland can rain. And I thought, why am I doing this? If I can sell pagers, I can support myself teaching piano. And that's when I started looking into starting a studio. And I got a hold of my old professor and I joined MTNA, Music Teachers National Association, and I started that career. And a few years later, I found Dr. Jill Timmons, who has been the strongest mentor of my life. And she took one look at me in my first lesson and she said, "You're a hybrid. Why do you need to choose between writing and playing?" And all of a sudden, I was open to the possibility that I didn't have to follow a script and I could create my own path.
So here we are. Wow, what an inspiring story. And I relate to a lot of the things you said. Now, you didn't really talk about doing collaborative piano, but I know from reading some of your works that you have done a fair amount of collaborative piano. And you might not know, but collaborative piano is also my background. So it's something that I'm really interested in. So I'm curious about that part of your career. And then I want to talk a little bit about what piano teachers can learn from what you and I know as collaborative pianists.
Collaborative piano is my favorite thing in the world. I adore working with other people. I'm very social. My last name's Rizzo. I'm half Italian. I mean, locking me in a practice room by myself, I have to discipline myself to stay there because I really want to go out and be social. I should have been a singer temperamentally, I think. But I ended up in piano and I love playing the piano. And one of the greatest gifts of my life is playing chamber music with people or collaborating with another pianist, or many times accompanying and being a collaborative pianist for soloists. My favorite repertoire when I wasn't sharing a keyboard or doing two pianos with another pianist who's playing instrumental music, primarily woodwinds and brass, because once again, a lot of that stuff kept me in the 20th century.
Oh, yeah, for sure. All that saxophone repertoire. Ooh.
Can we talk about the Creston?
Oh, no.
It's brutal. It's brutal, but it's fun.
It is. And it's beautiful, actually.
Yeah. And it's so much fun. And the reward of being able to work with, well, a saxophone or trumpet or some, instrument like that that can really fill a hall. It's not like, accompanying the flute where you're sotto voce many times, just because you don't want to pound over the top of them. So to match energy with people and to create that shared experience is something that, had I known in college just how rewarding it was, I think I would have just specialized in that. But I was so headstrong, thinking that I needed to be a soloist because I had this image of myself that was formed by, the fantasy of being Van Cliburn rather than, actually who I was. That, it delayed my development as a collaborative pianist for a while.
Yeah, I love that. And I also just love collaborative piano. And you're right, it's so fun to work with other people. And I feel like I've progressed as a pianist so much farther because of my career as a collaborative pianist, because it gets you on stage, it gets you playing all kinds of repertoire that you never would have maybe come across. I don't know. For me, I'm not a full-time collaborative pianist anymore, but when I was at the piano for 6, sometimes 8 hours a day, which I wouldn't have been able to do, I don't think, in any other career. So I know that as piano teachers, often we neglect actually playing the piano. And my job now is more administrative, more teaching. And I find that I'm not playing the piano as much. And I would love to hear your take on that and what advice you would give to piano teachers who just aren't making the time to actually sit at their instrument and play the piano.
That is a real problem for teachers. Many times it isn't just the time they're spending teaching, but a lot of people are combining their family lives. The bulk in the United States of the music teachers, for instance, are women, and many times they're raising children or maintaining, second jobs or something like that in addition to their piano teaching. And the practicing gets lost. My suggestion is, first of all, the very practical is you have to schedule it in like you would anything else, and we all know, we all tell our students the same thing, which is to do less time per day rather than trying to bang out, 5 hours on, the one day you have off. And to just get up a little earlier in the morning if necessary. I remember years ago, in fact, I wrote about this recently on my blog, but I was really swamped with a lot of collaborative and teaching work. And I kept hearing Chopin's G minor ballade in my head, and it wouldn't leave me alone. And I said, well, I don't have time to work on that thing. I hadn't played it for ages. And I thought, I'm going to go back, blah, blah, blah. So finally, I got to the place I had to get it out of my head. And I put aside, it must have been half an hour a day. And that's all I did for half an hour a day. And I got it back in my hands. And the reward of that far outstripped the amount of time I put into it. And because I was so motivated, it came back quickly. So that leads me to the next part of my answer to your question is, if you want to get back into playing, you have to pick something you are dying to play. We get in trouble because we come out of, schooling, and we have our degrees and we have our teachers' voices ringing in our heads. And many times we have other teachers' voices that we hear around us, and everybody say, oh, well, I just don't understand if you could even be considered serious if you're not playing Hindemith this year. If you don't like Hindemith, don't play Hindemith. Or if, you're not feeling that, Bach right now, don't play Bach. Go where your heart is. Look at your Spotify playlist and ask yourself, what is it my heart's telling me right now? And that's what you start playing. Because if you start with a should, you're not going to do it.
I love that. And maybe not worrying so much about your bad technique, or because that was going to be my next question is how do we get back into shape? But I think maybe you just answered it, like find something you love and the pieces will fall into place.
The thing is that if you lead with the passion, you're going to work like mad to get the technique back. If you decided, you know what, I cannot live unless I play that Chopin ballade or unless I play that Beethoven sonata or something that is just haunting you. If you get to a passage you can't play, as a piano teacher, you know, all right, you know what, I haven't played my scales in 6 months. There's a reason why I can't play this section. Maybe I need to get back in there and get the scale work done. Many times people are putting the cart before the proverbial horse and they say, well, I really can't work on all this repertoire until I get my technique back. I know people who do nothing but say, okay, I'm going to do 45 minutes of technique. And no wonder they're not motivated. You know, if they start with the idea of, okay, if I am learning this technique specifically to play the pieces that I want to play, then the practicing is going to get done and the technique will follow. Our hands already know this. Any of us who have taught students who, adult students who come back after they've been gone from the piano for 10, 20 years or something like that, it's rusty in the beginning, but all of a sudden you see the muscle memory kick in and their technique comes back. And we have more training than most of these people. And that it comes back. We just have to have faith.
Yeah. And I think not just don't get so caught up with, oh, my technique isn't what it was when I was in college or whenever. Like, none of us, it's like getting back in shape with our bodies. Like, sorry, I'm not in the same shape I was when I was 20, you know,
Yeah.
but I can still do something.
Well, we have to live the phase we're in. I had an adult student who was a very passionate adult learner. She started as a beginner. And she was somebody who was at the piano every single day. I mean, I've never seen anybody work so hard other than a professional. And in the last 3 years of her life, she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And she still wanted to get to the piano. And the place she got to is she had to learn to play the notes she was capable of playing on the days that she could play. And she played all the way to the end. And I also remember a retired piano teacher who came up to me after a concert, and I'd heard her play when she was in her prime, and she was phenomenal. I mean, she was a fierce player, technique to burn. And I asked her how she was doing, and she said she was still playing. I asked her what she was working on. She showed me her hands, and they were completely gnarled up with arthritis. And I was like, oh, Betty, oh no. And she said, no, it's okay. She said, I find the music my hands can play. And that's what I play. And she was working on some Debussy that she could handle. She was working on some other pieces. I don't remember what else she told me, but pieces that her hands could play because the musicality was still there. She could still express it. She just couldn't do it in the same way.
It's beautiful. Thank you for sharing those stories. I want to transition just a little bit and talk a little more about performing as a piano teacher. I've heard from two different kind of groups of piano teachers. There's the piano teachers who are terrified to perform, and they're usually the ones who say, I'm not in as good of shape and I haven't played for all these years. And then I hear from other ones who actually do enjoy performing, but they just don't have the opportunities because they're, like you said, teaching and they have family and all of this. Could you speak a little bit about those two groups and in the context, I guess, of performing when most of your life is teaching?
Well, I will address the fearful ones first because I knew an awful lot of these people over the course of the years that I was teaching. And the sad thing is that they are so caught up in their idea of how things should be done based on maybe what they were taught in school, or many times, I mean, let's talk about the ugliness that comes of the dark side of piano teaching. Piano teachers as a group are generally a great group of people. And then there are a handful of toxic ones in every organization. And they're the ones who show up at performances with their little pursed lips, many times with the scores in front of them. And they are sitting there anxious to see, excited to see when somebody's going to mess up. And many times the sad thing is this is coming from their own sense of not being able to perform and their own bitterness around that, not necessarily about anybody who's on the stage. Those of us who joined organizations and decided to find a way to perform all have stories about being really torn into by people like that in a very vicious and sometimes public way. So the people who are fearful have good reason to be fearful. And my advice to them is, first of all, play something that nobody knows.
That's a good one.
If you get up there and you play the Revolutionary Etude and you fall off the notes, it's like messing up the Star Spangled Banner. I mean, everybody knows. If you get up there and nobody's heard it, maybe find something by a living composer, because I got to shove that in there since that's my particular thing. But find something that people don't know. They have no preconceived ideas. There's not going to be somebody sitting there going, say, well, Brendel didn't play it that way, And so all they know is, oh, somebody's up there playing. And that's really interesting. I wonder what it is. The other thing I would say is look at what it is that scares you. Is it playing by yourself? Is it playing from memory? Is it, something else? And so I would say in those situations, just say, okay, if it's playing by myself, how about I work into it by, finding people with whom I can collaborate? And believe me, everybody is always looking for a collaborative pianist. Everyone, everywhere. We'll talk about that in a minute, and then the other part too is if it's performing from memory, why do you need to memorize it? Just use the score. Just get back into it. Get back on the horse, so to speak. And as far as the other fear part of it is, think about that whole process of just desensitizing oneself. You start by playing for trusted people. You start by recording yourself and filming yourself, because there's something really nerve-wracking about knowing you have to see it. And then you move to playing it maybe for a playing group. Then maybe you take it to maybe have a soiree in your home, and you invite people over and you serve them tasty things and a lot of alcohol. So if you mess up, they don't remember. And then you work your way up to whatever you think that your dream is. And what Jill Timmons told me in the beginning, she said, the best thing to do is think of making a list of 1 to 10, with 1 being I'm playing in the studio by myself, and 10 being I'm on the stage in Carnegie Hall, if that's what scares you more than anything. And look at these steps and you work your way up from 1 to however high up you want to go. And then as far as opportunities are concerned, seriously, everybody is looking for a pianist. Everybody. If it's a local church, that's a great place to start, because they're always looking for somebody to help accompany the choir. High schools, colleges, even middle schools, they have music programs. They need accompanists for musicals, for choir programs, for solo and ensemble festival. Finding a playing group with other teachers, provided that they're people that you trust. Playing, in nursing homes and retirement centers. These are low stress areas. And then as you get your feet under you, I recommend working with a master teacher, because these people have an opportunity to open doors and help expand your opportunities. And also looking at, what's going on in your community? Are there sack lunch concerts? When I was in Portland, they had, the old church concerts. Book yourself for that. If you don't want to do it all yourself, get people with whom to collaborate. My first recital back after college is I split a program with another teacher in Portland, and we just revived our old college repertoire, because we knew this stuff. We brought it back. We added a couple of forehand pieces, and then we invited our students. And, I was never somebody who liked to perform at the end of my student recitals, because I felt like I had enough going on just organizing the
Same, yeah.
you know.
Yes. Yes. I have way too many other things on my mind to be thinking about that. Yeah. I think you gave a lot of really good advice. And I think too, just being kind to yourself and maybe playing something that, like you said, you're really comfortable with, or something that's at a little bit lower level than your ideal, so that you can feel good. And even if you're a little nervous, your technique still works and things still, you can play through some of those nerves. So yeah, that was a great answer. Thank you. So you mentioned the new music thing. Okay, personally, I like to play the dead guys, but I know that I've played a lot of new music because as a collaborative pianist, and especially like you said, playing for woodwinds and brass players, you do a lot of that. I would love to hear how you approach these new works differently than Chopin and Beethoven and all of those.
Broad brushstrokes, I would say Chopin and Beethoven, there's a path that other people have cleared for me. When I go into that music, I go in with it's already in my ear. I hear what other pianists have done. I hear other people's ideas. I know what musicologists have said about these particular composers and their styles, and how something is, I hate to say supposed to be played because I hate that word, but how it traditionally is played. And so there's a sense that somebody has already bushwhacked through it. When I go to a brand new piece of music, and a lot of my career has been being the first person to play a new piece of music, it is as if I've walked out and there's an unblemished field of snow, and I get to be the first person to put tracks across it. And many times I don't even have a MIDI recording of it. So walking into it, it really is getting to know a brand new friend. I have no preconception. When I've worked with a composer before, which happens, I have, certain ones that I particularly connect with, and so I know their style. I kind of have a sense of where these things are likely to go harmonically and that sort of thing. So it gives me some hint. But the reality is, every single one is a journey to an undiscovered country. And so my approach to it first is to say, what a privilege that I get to be the one to birth this. And I start by just, of course, looking through it, maybe reading through a bit of it. But then really, it's a case of, like any other piece of music, chunking it out piece by piece and letting the meaning and the beauty and stuff come through once I've lived with it a really long time, since it's brand new. And then working with the composer.
Yeah, that's a privilege, isn't it?
Oh, it's wonderful. It is wonderful. I remember when I was in my 20s, and I remember playing something and I thought, I wish I could have sat down. I think it was Liszt. I wish I could have sat down with Liszt and had a discussion with him about this piece. I think it was Sposalizio. And I thought, what a privilege it was for the pianist, who knew him and who could do that. And later on, when I was working with composers, I thought, I get to do that now. I get to go to them and ask, what did you mean by this? And what I've found with composers is that performers, particularly those of us who've been raised in the, classical conservatory model, is we're more uptight about it than they are.
Yeah, that's true.
My first recording that I did was for somebody else. It was Dave Deason. It was, the name of the recording was Oregon Impressions, and he's a fantastic, fantastic composer. And we were in there working on a piece, and he and the producer were saying, okay, no, I don't think this section quite works. That section doesn't quite work. Here I'm at the piano. I had polished it to perfection. And they start rewriting it in the studio. And then they handed me the new stuff because, these guys were, they had jazz backgrounds too. And they said, here, play it like this. Here, practice it for 20 minutes, then we'll record it. And I described it to somebody as, having had a Miss America makeover, and somebody just taking their hands to my hair and scrambling it all up and saying, okay, here's the new look, because it was so disorienting, but it was so freeing too. And I've also had the experience when I play this stuff that sometimes I'll come up with an idea and a composer says, I like that better, change it in the score.
I was thinking when you were talking, so I don't do what you do, but the church choir that I play for, the conductor is also a composer. And so he'll arrange a lot of things for us, or he'll write me a piano part to go along with a hymn, or sometimes we'll do original compositions. So it's the same thing where, like, even in rehearsal, he'll be like, oh, that's not really working. Or I don't want to do that. Or I'll go into his office and say, what did you mean here? And he's like, oh, just some twinkly starry sounds. I'm like, oh, that's what that notation means. I was trying to like do it perfectly the way he wrote. And he's like, no, just some twinkly, sound effects there. I'm like, oh, okay. So yeah, it's fun and it's totally different. You're right than when you play Bach or I want to talk just a little bit about your writing. Now, I will tell listeners, we arranged this interview really quickly, so I didn't have a chance to get your book or read it or anything, but I would love for you to tell us about your book.
Well, it is the story of a young pianist who is a survivor of the Branch Davidian fire in Waco, Texas in the early 1990s. Now, this is fictional. I always tell people this because every time somebody I know reads it, they ask me whether or not it's my story. It is not. I have a background connection with the Branch Davidians, and so that was my interest in them, but I didn't survive that cult background. But this character loses her family, her parents in that fire, and she comes out, and it's a story of her learning how to heal from trauma, and she finds that healing through music, particularly through the music of Bach. And so the entire thing is her journey to that acceptance because she's somebody who, her name is Cassie, and she's somebody who is very buttoned down. She doesn't want people to know that this is her background. She's trying so hard to be normal, and she's horrifically ashamed that this is what she came from. She makes up an alternative history as to where she's from. She moves to live with her grandmother in Southern Oregon, and she buries all of it until eventually she can't run from it anymore. And then she works through her healing again with primarily the music of Bach as a guide.
Wow, it sounds really powerful. I want to read it now.
Oh, please do.
Yeah, I really do want to. Do you have any new things on the horizon that you'd want to share, either new books or blogs or performances, anything coming up that you're excited about?
Well, there are always new blogs on, posts on No Dead Guys, which is my blog that really is, like you say, about more than just interviewing composers. And I have another project in the works, but I'm not sure if it's going to be published yet. So I probably won't talk about that yet, since it's not a definite thing yet. As far as performances go, I don't know. There may be some videos to check out in the future, or performances. Again, I'm working on all sorts of things that are turning me inside out creatively, which is really exciting. The thing about dropping the idea of should and the whole path that many of us were raised on about this is the way we make music, this is the way we teach music, this is the only way to do things, is all of a sudden you find these beautiful, beautiful other paths for expression. And you have these rebirths that happen on a regular basis. For me, I'm working on a piece by the Native American composer Ron Warren, who does primarily native flute, but he also wrote a couple of piano pieces for Paul Barnes, one of which is of mountains and deserts. And the whole idea behind this, I've been working on it for a few months, is that rather than the stereotypical method that we all have of learning a piece and presenting it like a speech, is that you walk into a room and you respond to the room. You respond to the environment, and that's what you play.
What does that mean?
That's what I'm learning.
Okay.
It means
Wow.
reading the energy in the room and reading your own energy and looking beyond a polished, this is the only way I play it method. And he says sometimes he walks out on stage as a native flutist, and he walks out on stage and he has a whole set list with his band. And he'll look over and say, we're not doing this one anymore. We're going to do this other one instead because someone in the audience needs to hear this other one. It's all intuition.
Wow. And really thinking outside of yourself. Like so often when we get on stage, all we're thinking about is ourselves, right? And thinking about the people listening. That's beautiful.
It's a gift and it's a communication. It's the indigenous way of making music is that everybody's a participant. You don't have performers and listeners. Everybody's participating, and he has taught me so much about this. I had him write a guest post a year and a half ago on my site. It's song catching. It's his way he does his writing, but that's the name of the post, the song catching, Ron Warren. And he talks about how he writes his music. He has a master's degree in composition and traditional Western approach, doctoral degree. Sorry, Ron. Um, and he actually, when he does his writing, he goes and he listens and he waits to find the songs that are supposed to come to him. And he says that's how his performances work as well. You listen and you say, how's that song coming to me today? And that's how you play it.
Wow. That's so inspiring. I love it.
It's pretty exciting. But it does mean that in the process of working on it, I'm not sure when or how I'm going to be able to break out of the old way I've been presenting music
Mm-hmm.
and be able to do it this way.
Well, you'll have to come back and let us know how it turns out.
Will do.
Rhonda, before we tell listeners where they can find your blog and everything, is there anything else you want to share with us? Anything that I didn't ask that you want to talk about?
I want to tell my fellow piano teachers out there, stop thinking should. Get rid of should. We worry so much about what people think we should be doing or what we think we should be doing. We spend so much time worrying about how other people are thinking about who we are and how we're presenting our music. And the reality is that we have this gift and we have this ability to bring people so much joy and so much happiness. And right now, as the world gets more and more stressful for a lot of people, what an incredible thing we have. And if we're so caught up in our own insecurities, and I feel them too, then we can't give this gift to other people. If we're worrying about perfection and worrying about should and everything that we've been said, throw it out. Throw it out. I have a friend who's, classically trained. She's got her master's degree in performance. She's currently on the side playing in a mom band just because it's fun and it brings people joy.
That's great.
And there's so much out there. Look for a new path, forge a new one, and share that music that makes you happy.
And as we let go of that should for ourselves, we'll let go of it for our students, I think. We'll stop telling them what they should be doing, right?
Yeah. There's always a different way of doing it. And it takes us getting out of our own way, at least for me, because I'm a very structured person. And I think this will die in me 15 minutes after I do. But, it's a journey for me to get rid of that, just this completely tight feeling inside, like I have to do it one way. And it doesn't have to be that way. And the more that I have met people through my blog and talked to people whose worldviews are so much bigger than mine and musical views, the more I realize I'm only boxing myself into a jail if I keep thinking it needs to be just one way.
That's so powerful. Thank you, Rhonda. You
You're
shared
welcome.
so much insight with me, and I hope that our listeners get as much out of it as I did. Can you tell listeners where they can find your blog, your book, anything else you want to share?
Yes. You can find my writing on my blog, which is nodeadguys.com. And my book is The Waco Variations, and it can be found on Amazon or on my website. There's a link through that. And then I have a YouTube channel as well, and that's just under my name, Rhonda Rizzo. It's easy to find, and it has a lot of my favorite composers that I've played over the years on there of my playing. And so I want to thank you. I'm just so honored to be interviewed and be part of this amazing thing that you and the rest of your organization are doing to bring more creativity to piano teaching and to making music.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for giving your time and being here today, Rhonda. I loved getting to know you. This far exceeded my expectations. So I'm going to be on cloud 9 for the rest of the day after this interview. So thank you.
Thank you.
That's the end of the show for this week. I hope that you were inspired by my talk with Rhonda today. I loved getting to know her, and she has so much wisdom to share with pianists. If you haven't checked out Tim Topham's Topcast this week, make sure you head over there to hear an interview with Olivia Riddle about adding early childhood music classes to your studio. That is sure to be a good one. I'm Rachel Ehring, and you've been listening to the Top Music Piano Podcast. I'll talk with you again next week.
How do you keep up to date with all the latest trends and research into music education? How do you connect with other teachers around the world and make sure your teaching stays fresh and relevant for students of all ages and stages, both now and into the future? I created our Top Music Pro membership to be the one-stop shop for music teaching resources, training, support and community, and I'd love for you to come and join us inside. With over 40 comprehensive training courses, hundreds of teaching demonstrations and lesson plans, free monthly sheet music, discounts, and all the business and pedagogy support you could ever need, Top Music Pro is the community you've been looking for. If you're ready to level up your learning from the podcast and join thousands of other teachers in our global network, head over to topmusicpro.com today.